Welcome to the Brimful Podcast. I'm your host, Pamela, a mother of two, an international board-certified lactation consultant, childbirth educator, and former doula and early childhood educator. I've spent 20 years supporting families, and I'm here to share insights, tips, and stories about childbirth and infant feeding. Whether you're expecting your first baby, navigating infant feeding, or you're a perinatal professional adding to your skills and knowledge, this podcast is your trusted resource for expert, evidence-based advice and heartfelt conversations, empowering you with the knowledge and confidence to nurture your growing family. Be sure to follow me on social media at brim.familycare or connect with me at my website at brimfamilycare.com. Let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. I'm your host Pamela, and today I wanted to take a few moments to share some info about those early days of feeding your baby. We're going to be talking about feeding a full-term healthy baby. So if you have a preemie baby or a baby with health complications, please find an IBCLC in your area to help you in feeding your baby, because this will be different advice than what you need. And even if you do have a healthy full-term baby and you are having challenges, you are going to need personalized advice and care from an IBCLC. This is going to be generalized info. So if you are having challenges, again, please reach out to your IBCLC in your community. And finally, we will look at what an IBCLC is, how they can help, where to find one, and how to advocate for families to have better access to them here in Canada. So let's start off with a bit of the science behind lactation. Lactation is the process of producing milk in the mammary glands, and previously we always thought the breasts were more like a bladder, but now we know they are more like a gland, so we can actually ask them to keep producing. It doesn't just hold milk there until the baby's ready to use it. So hormones like prolactin and oxytocin are the main hormones in milk production and releasing the milk. When a baby suckles at the breast, it stimulates nerve endings in the nipples, and then this sends signals to the brain to release prolactin, which helps produce milk, and oxytocin, which causes the milk to be released from the glandular tissue through the milk ducts. The process is commonly known as the letdown reflex. So there's 3 stages of milk production, and the first stage starts at about 16 weeks of pregnancy until a few days after birth. In this stage, the cells inside the mammary glands that produce milk will grow in number and size. And so you'll notice some breast changes, like the growth of your breasts. They'll also become a little bit tender probably. Your areolas will darken, and this is when you'll start to produce colostrum, a thick yellowish milk that's rich in antibodies and nutrients and helps build your baby's immune system. And it actually also provides prebiotics and probiotics to build their healthy gut flora, and a little bit of laxative so that they can pass their first poop, which is meconium. It's a really sticky, tarry substance. So your breast milk actually helps them pass that. So you have everything that your baby needs when they're born. And then 3 or 4 days after your baby is born, you'll have a drastic increase in the production of your milk. This is stage 2 of milk production, and it's often referred to as milk coming in. And what's actually happening here is once your placenta is delivered, there is a drastic drop in your progesterone levels. And in addition to this, the presence of elevated levels of prolactin, cortisol, and insulin are what stimulates this stage of lactation. So this stage of lactation is a bit of a delicate one and is where we can get into a bit of a bumpy road if that dance of hormones isn't initiated quite as smoothly as we would like. So there can be delays in this stage of lactation. This can be caused by certain health issues in the parent, or a complicated birth process, or a baby with health challenges. or a baby who is jaundiced, which is actually a really common physiological process after birth, but can sometimes cause complications. Other causes are retained products of conception, so pieces of the placenta remain in the uterus, and this is a problem because this prevents that drop in progesterone that we need for that second stage of lactation to begin. C-sections are also a risk of delayed onset of the second stage of lactation. And this is because surgical birth doesn't necessarily allow that process of hormones to release typically like they do in a vaginal birth. Also, studies have found that babies tend to be sleepier after C-sections and not want to come to the breast or chest as soon as perhaps they would with a vaginal birth, and they may not come to the breast as frequently as those born vaginally. And studies also show that the parent may not be feeling well and unable to have skin-to-skin time with the baby. And we know that babies have a series of pre-feeding behaviors that they need to go through in order to use their reflexes for feeding. And so if this doesn't happen, then feeding can be further delayed. The stimulation of the breasts or the chest is also being delayed. And so everything that the body needs in order for that milk production to increase is just kind of lagging. Sometimes these things are unavoidable. So there's things that you can do to help the process along, and that's unswaddling your baby and using lots of skin-to-skin contact. That will benefit your baby by regulating everybody's nervous system and allowing your baby to move through these instinctual pre-feeding behaviors that they have. So you or your partner can do this. And if your baby's not quite ready to come to the breast or the chest and you're not feeling well enough to hold your baby, perhaps you can do some hand expression every 2 to 3 hours. This can really help ensure your body knows that it's time to transition that milk. I really recommend hand expression over pumping at this stage because it's just more effective than a pump because that colostrum is just so sticky. So learn how to do this hand expression ahead of time before you have your baby so that you feel really confident if that is necessary. And if you have any endocrine health conditions such as hypothyroidism, PCOS, insulin resistance, you can continue taking the medication that you might be on, and this will help support your milk production. And finally, stage 3 of lactation is the maintenance of your milk production, and this starts at about day 9 postpartum. And this is when the hormones of lactation are less relied upon than the removal of milk. And so this is why frequent removal of milk, frequent feedings or frequent pumping is going to establish, support, and maintain your milk supply. And this stage doesn't end until you wean your baby. So you'll have lots of help when your baby is born to help your baby latch, and you figure out feeding and caring for yourself as well throughout all of that. And then you'll get to go home and you'll still be kind of learning how to breastfeed. And this can be a really magical and amazing time, but it can also be really challenging because although breastfeeding is a natural thing that us mammals do, it can also feel really unnatural for a lot of parents. It takes time to get the hang of feeding, and because you'll be feeding every 2 to 3 hours around the clock, this is why it will be really important to draw boundaries for visitors and choose very carefully who you'll have in your space for those first few weeks. So let me back up a little bit before I get ahead of myself. I'm going to rewind back to the first 24 hours of your baby's life. The first 24 hours, your baby will likely be sleeping because the birth process is a lot for them too. So they're going to be really sleepy. It could be a bit challenging to wake them up for those every 2 to 3 hour feeds. So this is where that hand expression can come in really handy. And then you can use that milk that you've expressed and put it in a syringe and syringe feed your baby. And this can actually give them a little bit more energy to be able to feed at the breast or chest a little bit easier. And if you know that you want to exclusively breastfeed and want to avoid the use of bottles and therefore possibly artificial nipple preference or the preference for an easier route to feed, then you can use these syringes instead of a bottle just to get you by. And to add to that, if you know that you are eventually going to be using bottles and you want to combination feed, but you want to protect breastfeeding skills for both you and your baby, it's recommended that you wait at least 4 to 6 weeks until breast or chest feeding is off to a really good start. You have a really solid milk supply. Your baby is feeding really well and gaining weight really well. This is when you can introduce that bottle and you can actually pump to collect milk to use in those bottles if you're preferring not to use formula. So this is a great reason to have a prenatal lactation appointment with an IBCLC so they can show you how to hand express or pump with your own body, how to collect the milk, how to safely store it, and then how to actually feed your baby with it if you need to do that. And in addition to that, the IBCLC can go over any of your health challenges that you might have so that you can prepare and plan for feeding your baby ahead of time. And then the next night, they wake up more often and they cry more. And this is often referred to as day 2 syndrome. It's not actually a syndrome, but it's like a really common behavior from newborn babies. Your baby is much more aware of the fact that they aren't cozy in the womb anymore, and all the sensations of the outside world are overwhelming them. They need lots of comforting from you with that skin-to-skin time and suckling at the breast or chest as often as they need. So during this time, many parents think that maybe they don't have enough milk because their baby's crying so much. But in reality, they are just adjusting to the outside world. Breast or chest feeding will not only soothe and feed them, but this frequent feeding also helps to establish a good milk supply. So it's a really natural process that happens between you and your baby. It's a little dance. Newborns typically feed 8 to 12 times per day and possibly more during really normal cluster feeding stages. This can seem overwhelming, but it's important for stimulating your milk production. So you can kind of plan ahead for this stage by ensuring that you have a really cozy sleeping area for everybody, a really safe sleeping area for your baby, taking turns between you and your partner or another care provider or a postpartum doula to get through this day 2 syndrome so that you can take turns doing the skin to skin, feeding on demand, and I promise you'll get through it. And it's also normal for your baby to lose a little bit of weight in the first few days, but they should start to gain it back once the mature milk comes in. So you'll be keeping an eye on your baby's wet and dirty diapers to make sure that your baby is getting enough milk. And your care provider is going to be seeing you regularly to watch their weight gain. Usually babies are back up to their birth weight by about 2 weeks of age. And if there is a little bit of a challenge with getting that weight gain going again, this is a good time to reach out to an IBCLC. And you can also reach out to a lactation consultant if you have latching difficulties, if you have sore nipples, you're concerned about your milk supply, maybe your baby comes to the breast and they get sleepy, and then when they get off the breast, they start crying, and so things are kind of feeling confusing. Don't wait it out, just ask for extra help if you need it. Now let's talk about what IBCLCs are, because I think this is not well known for a lot of people, what the differences are between an IBCLC or a lactation counselor or a La Leche League leader. There are differences, and the top gold standard of lactation care is an IBCLC. We have extensive and comprehensive training in human health and lactation and infant and child development. We are the specialists in the clinical management of breastfeeding. And although we deal with breastfeeding or chest feeding or body feeding, we also deal with bottle feeding and formula feeding and starting solids and all sorts of things. So I like to think of us as infant feeding experts rather than just lactation experts. You can find an IBCLC through hospitals or public health or in private practice. In the United States, you're likely to have insurance that covers your visit with an IBCLC, but here in Canada, it's a bit trickier. A care provider who has an IBCLC designation can bill MSP for your visit for babies aged 6 weeks and under. However, beyond 6 weeks, or if you're seeing a private practice LC like myself, it will require a fee. Some extended health plans will cover your visit and maybe the cost of a breast pump, but this isn't common, unfortunately. And while we are overseen by an international board, there are so few IBCLCs in Canada that we're not able to sustain a regulating body or college in order to be recognized and funded by our governments. I've created a petition for BC residents to advocate for the inclusion and recognition of IBCLCs in our medical services. I'll leave that link in the show notes for you, and please go sign it and share it. And a couple other ways that you can advocate for IBCLC care and the infant feeding expertise they provide is to advocate in your own workplace for the lactating parents that you work with. You can support the creation of policies or talk to your employer about getting lactation care added to your extended health plan. And then you can do things like supporting a new parent by offering them encouragement and practical help. Sometimes just a listening ear can make a huge difference. You can share accurate information about breastfeeding benefits and the supports available. You can help dispel any myths and misconceptions. Maybe purchase a gift certificate from an IBCLC for someone who you know is about to go on maternity leave. There's all sorts of ways to support new families with breast or chest feeding. And then finally, you can donate to certain organizations like the Canadian Lactation Consultant Association, or your local milk bank, or your local breastfeeding support group. I will put some links in the show notes for those as well. So as we wrap up this episode, I just want to send a little reminder that infant feeding is a unique journey for every single family. It's not always going to look the same, and I'm here to support you in finding ways of feeding your baby that suit you and your family. So please reach out if you need some help. Thank you so much for joining me today. Don't forget to rate the show and share it with your friends. Until next time, take care.